North Korea just fired an intermediate-range ballistic missile over Japan, and this, of course, is just another intensification of the escalation between these two countries. I have been talking about Japan for quite some time, going all the way back to late 2013. And one thing that I have been saying for years now is that Japan is going to revive as a military power. The United States wants this for obvious reasons, because the United States is afraid of both China and North Korea rising up in Northeast Asia, because these two countries are both Russian allies, and the last thing that America wants is Russian allies becoming dominating forces in any part of the world. And so America wants Japan to become more militaristic and more militarily independent, because America cannot fight on all of these fronts. America cannot fight any more major wars, because Americans have lost interest in war, understandably so. And so if a war breaks out in Northeast Asia between Japan and China, or between Japan and North Korea, or both at the same time, America wants to be able to rely on Japan to handle itself. So America is just allowing Japan to break its pacifistic post-war U.S.-imposed constitution. And that's been going on for decades. And people talk about how, oh, Japan is a pacifistic country. That's a bunch of nonsense. Currently, Japan is one of the biggest military powers in the world. And there was an interesting article on this subject that came out today. It was published by Army Technology. And it said basically that if Japan continues on with its projected military defense budget, Japan will eventually become the third largest military power in the world. And this is not really that surprising at all. Japan has quite a history of being militaristic. America and the Allies had a war with Japan, and that really goes without saying. And the Japanese people are very nationalistic. People say that this is not a bad thing. People say that this is great, a patriotic, nationalistic Japan. But then you actually read about the history of Japanese nationalism and how it was used to justify the slaughter of millions of people, horrific, diabolical human experimentation done by Unit 731, and also really horrific things, horrific war crimes that were done on POWs. All of these things were done under the justification of Japanese nationalism and militarism. And the fact that the Japanese people have been voting consistently for so many years for the Liberal Democrat Party, the Liberal Democratic Party of Shinzo Abe, whose legacy still lives on, really tells me that the Japanese people are still very nationalistic and don't mind militarism. They don't care, because one of the policies, one of the main goals of the LDP, going all the way back to Shinzo Abe's grandfather, Nobusuke Kishi, is to reinterpret Article 9 of the U.S.-imposed pacifistic Japanese constitution, which states quite clearly that the Japanese people forsake all war in order to justify the use of militarization, to justify militarism, to justify military buildup. And this favor towards changing Article 9, or really just interpreting it out of existence, has been going on for quite some time. It's been in the political climate of Japan for a long time. In fact, I've been reading this book. It's called Hidden Horrors by a professor, Japanese professor, Professor Tanaka. Full name is Yuki Tanaka. And in the introduction of this book, there's a very interesting line that I want to read to you guys. It talks about, and this book, by the way, was written in 1993. So he was writing this in the 90s. And he talks about how the Japanese people really don't care about what Article 9 says. They really have no issue with military buildup. And they really don't care about whatever atrocities their country committed during the Second World War. They are apathetic towards it. And the book says, now after 50 years, this victim consciousness, because he says that the Japanese people see themselves as victims. They see themselves as victims of America. And he says that this victim complex, this victim consciousness is rapidly disappearing, along with the consciousness of having been an aggressor. So the acknowledgement of being an aggressor is gone in Japan. This is basically what he's saying. That he's saying that it's disappearing, but this was written in 1993. So by now, it's pretty much gone. People don't care. This is clearly indicated in recent newspaper polls that reflect the popular attitude towards Japan's military roles in world political affairs, despite people's awareness that such military activities outside Japanese territory are clearly in breach of Article 9 of the Constitution. So he basically says that Japanese people don't really care if Japan wants to be involved in military activities outside of itself. He also talks about how in Japan, any sort of apology towards China was pretty much done for the purposes of making it easier to continue trade with China. So it was for economic reasons. It wasn't for moral reasons. So when people say, oh, look, Japan apologized for comfort women, or Japan apologized for whatever atrocities it committed against the Chinese, these sorts of apologies are done for the sake of making it easier to conduct commerce with Japan's neighbors. So it's not really done for moral reasons. If it were, there wouldn't be so many Japanese politicians denying that Nanking ever happened and denying that there were comfort women. And for those of you who don't know, comfort women were sex slaves who were kidnapped or captured by the Japanese imperial military and forced into sex slavery. These were women, just average women, Korean women, Chinese women, captured and forced into a life of being raped repeatedly by Japanese soldiers. If you want a perfect illustration of this, I would encourage everybody, if you haven't seen this film, to watch the movie City of Life and Death. You can watch it for free on YouTube. I should put the link below in the description for you guys to watch it. Now, you have people coming out and saying, oh my God, look, Japanese are becoming more nationalistic, becoming more independent. Right on. Dragon Ball Z, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pikachu, man, Super Smash Brothers on those damn Chinese communists, man. So let's just ignore whatever atrocities Japan committed. Let's just ignore the fact that so many members of Japan's parliament will actually deny whatever atrocities Japan committed in the past. Let's just ignore all of this stuff. Let's ignore the fact that during the Second World War, Japan had a horrific policy towards POWs. The book talks a lot about this. It talks about the Sandokan work camp in Southeast Asia, in which you had 2,500 Australian and British POWs. And how many of those POWs actually made it out alive? I think like 6 of them survived. Almost all of them were slaughtered by the Japanese. This was an empire that had no mercy. It was bent on bloodshed and genocide. And America doesn't care. America actually, after the Second World War, America worked to whitewash the reality of these crimes. Why? Because America wanted to use Japan as its little Cold War weapon in Asia. And that's the thing that I want to talk about here. America wants Japan to become militaristic and nationalistic. Because, as I said, America cannot deal with all of the conflicts and antagonisms taking place around the world against America's allies. America cannot deal with them. It's impossible. America, as powerful of an empire as it is, cannot spread itself too thin. Remember what happened to the Roman Empire. It went all the way up to Britain, and the Romans were so proud of this. But all the Romans were doing were just spreading themselves thin, and it actually weakened the empire. America cannot spread itself thin. It has to delegate power to other countries to deal with its own problems, and at the same time advance America's interest. In this case, advancing America's interest would be a powerful Japan in Northeast Asia, just like advancing America's interest in the Middle East would be a powerful Saudi Arabia. against Iran, or a powerful Turkey against Russia in the Black Sea, or a powerful Azerbaijan against Armenia, which is an ally to Iran and also an ally to Russia, or a powerful Croatia to counter Serbia. And recently I was reading about Operation Storm. This was a huge battle. This was like the biggest battle in Europe after the Second World War. Maybe now that fact has been changed or replaced with some battle that's taken place in Ukraine. But nonetheless, Operation Storm was a major battle that consisted of hundreds of thousands of people, both civilians and soldiers. Many people were displaced, and a lot of people were killed. But it was a huge battle between the Serbs and the Croatians, and the Americans armed and trained the Croats against the Serbs. Why? Because Serbia was controlling Yugoslavia, and Yugoslavia was really a giant government in the Balkans that controlled most of the Balkans, that did not want to submit to American power, and nor did it want to submit to Russian power. Russian power. So America just could not afford to have such a government in the middle of southeastern Europe. So the same thing goes with Japan. America has its dogs. America has its dogs. It has Japan in Asia. It has Germany in Europe, Turkey in the Near East, Saudi Arabia in the Middle East, Israel in the Middle East, and Latin America, it has a Chihuahua called Mexico and a golden retriever named Canada. It doesn't really need a dog in North and South America, because America is the top dog in North and South America. So America has its dogs, and when it has to unleash a dog, it will. Great example, Indonesia versus East Timor. East Timor revolted against Indonesia. The Americans and the Australians and the British were afraid that East Timor would become an ally to communist China. They couldn't afford this, so they gave a bunch of arms to Indonesia and unleashed the dog of Indonesia on East Timor. Hundreds of thousands of people were butchered. Huge numbers of women were raped. It was basically a Nanking in Southeast Asia. Another example, Bangladesh versus Pakistan. Bangladesh wanted independence from Pakistan. America needed Pakistan as a Cold War weapon against not the Chinese, because Pakistan was an ally to China. I almost made a mistake there. But because America was afraid that India would become an ally to the Soviet Union. It didn't trust India at this time. And so it supported Pakistan's war against Bangladesh because it needed Pakistan as an ally, potentially against India. And Pakistan invaded Bangladesh, butchered hundreds of thousands of people, around 300,000 people, raped hundreds of thousands of women, and America completely supported it. The Nixon administration completely supported it. In other words, if Japan ever had to be released, according to America's perception, America would release Japan. And if Japan ever commits another Nanking, America would not give a damn. Just as it did not give a damn when Pakistan killed hundreds of thousands of people in a genocide against the Bangladeshis, and when Indonesia butchered hundreds of thousands of people in East Timor. America would not give a damn. Because America sees Japan as its rabid dog against China, North Korea, and Russia. And this whole thing with North Korea is really an external, it's an external threat to Japan. At the same time, it's perfect propaganda to justify Japanese militarism. I've always talked about the rise of Japan, a revival of Japanese power. And when you have a revival of a country, you always need an external threat to justify it. You always need an external threat to justify it. In the case of Japan, it's North Korea, it's China, it's Russia. Bottom line. And Japan is eventually going to become one of the biggest military powers in the world if Japan continues on with its projected defense spending. By the year 2027, Japan will become one of the biggest military spenders in the world, up there in the top three, right next to America and China. And it may be later than that. It may be the 2030s. And the Japanese are already developing their own fighter jet, the FX fighter jet, and that's going to be operational by the 2030s. I will not be surprised to see a major war in Asia involving Japan by the 2030s or 2040s. It would not surprise me whatsoever. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.